This is Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi. Here now, Tony Bruschi.
There's so many cases we cover where when you hear of the horrible deeds done by an individual, you wonder, what else have they done? If they're capable of all of this, what happened prior to this mountain of madness over here? And in the Brian Walshe case, if you already thought, wow, this is one giant heaping steam of pile of what, wait till you hear this. Wait till you hear the origin story. Wait till you hear more about what Brian Walshe did prior to the art fraud, prior to the murdering of his wife and dismembering of her, prior to stealing that loving, kind soul from his 3 children's tiny hands. What else is this narcissistic monster capable of? That's this story. Buckle up. And while we tell it, if you don't mind, I'd love to get your thoughts in the comment section on YouTube. If you're not already there, search Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi. And if you can, in the review section on Apple Podcasts, if you wouldn't mind, leave us a review. Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi is the name of the podcast. A few kind words would be greatly appreciated while you're listening to this. Thank you in advance. So let me take a sip of my coffee and we will begin. Dr. Thomas Walshe, he was a prominent neurologist at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. Yeah. Kind of physician who headed divisions and built a reputation over decades. He was also a man who, by the end of his life, had made one thing absolutely clear to everyone around him. His only son was not to receive a dime from his estate. When Thomas died unexpectedly in September of 2018 while traveling to India, his will left no room for interpretation. I hereby bequeath to Brian R. Walshe my best wishes, but nothing else from my estate. That's the father's final message to the son he hadn't spoken to in over a decade, according to court documents. Brian Walshe responded to that message by allegedly destroying the will and taking everything anyway. Because he's that type of dude. Yeah. This is real. This is, again, par for the course in a story where there's been so many chapters of, but wait, there's more. Oh, but wait, there's more. This is the Brian Walshe story that never made national headlines, the ones that played out in Plymouth County Probate Court years before Anna disappeared, before the hatchets and hacksaws entered the public record. If you want to understand who this man is, according to those who knew him longest, you don't start with New Year's Day 2023. You start right here. The estrangement between Thomas and Brian wasn't the result of a family disagreement or clash of values. According to court filings and statements from Thomas's closest friends, it was the result of theft on a scale that's hard to comprehend between a parent and child. In the early 2000s, Brian acquired a dilapidated house in Lenox, Massachusetts. Father and son struck a deal. Thomas would fund the renovations, reportedly investing over $500,000 into the property. When the house sold, Thomas would recoup his investment, and Brian would keep whatever profit remained. A straightforward arrangement. Generous, even. The kind of thing a father does when he's trying to help his adult child be an adult. The house was eventually refinanced. And on the night of the closing, according to a longtime family friend who spoke to the Boston Globe, Brian took the check Estimates range from $800,000 to nearly $1 million, and disappeared. No repayment, no explanation. That phone call was the last time Thomas Walshe heard from his son for over 12 years, allegedly. Think about that for a moment. Not a loan gone bad, not a business partnership that fell apart. According to people in Thomas's inner circle, his own son allegedly stole a fortune from him and then cut off all contact. The friend who recounted the story put it simply: the day Brian took that check was the last time Thomas heard from him. The fallout went beyond money. Court documents filed in the probate case reveal a portrait of Brian Walshe that his father's friends had assembled over years of observation. Jeffrey Ornstein, one of Thomas's longtime friends, wrote in a signed statement that Brian had been a long-term patient at Austin Riggs Center, a psychiatric hospital in Berkshire. According to Ornstein, Brian was diagnosed there as a sociopath. And Thomas had told him this would never change. Another friend, Fred Pescatore, Fred Pescatore, offered an even more disturbing account. He described a trip to China that he took with Brian and Thomas years earlier. According to Pescatore's court filing, he watched Brian attempt to smuggle antiques out of the country. When guards confronted him about it, Brian allegedly grabbed a stanchion and tried to attack 4 or 5 of them. Pescatore didn't mince words in his assessment. Brian is not only a sociopath, but also a very angry and physically violent person. Ta-da! We're the aristocrats. That's why he did what he did and was able to do it. These aren't accusations from prosecutors in a murder trial. These are statements from people who knew the Walshe family for decades, submitted under oath in a probate dispute years before anyone heard the name Anna Walshe. Given all of this, the language Thomas used in his will makes sense. He drafted it in May of 2016 with 2 witnesses present. He acknowledged that he had only one child, Brian Reza Walshe, with whom I am not in contact. He appointed his nephew Andrew as executor, and he made certain there would be no ambiguity about his intentions. If Brian wasn't receiving anything, it was deliberate. Thomas told friends repeatedly over the years that his son had been cut out. One friend recalled Thomas explaining that reconciling with Brian would mean letting mayhem back into my life, and he wasn't willing to do that. Good for him. Good for him. You call these fuckers out and you leave them at the side of the road to rot. Because if you don't, this is what you get. You can't fix certain people. And sociopathy is one of them. You get that diagnosis, you're like, oh, fuck. Like, this is yeah. It's a sociopath. At least that's the allegation. Then in September of 2018, Thomas died while traveling overseas. He was gone before anyone could prepare. And according to court documents, Brian moved with purpose, like predators and sociopaths do. Despite having had almost no contact with his father for over a decade, Brian reached out to Jeffrey Ornstein shortly after Thomas's death. He wanted keys to the whole house, said he needed some paperwork. Ornstein agreed to help. He went to the property, located the documents Brian had mentioned, and while inside, he noticed something sitting on the cabinet in Thomas's office: the will. Ornstein read it. He saw the list of beneficiaries. He saw that Brian had been explicitly disinherited. And then Ornstein did something that would eventually derail Brian's entire scheme. He photographed the will with his cell phone. But he didn't tell Brian what he'd found. He felt sorry for him. He left a set of keys under the mat and went home, keeping what he knew to himself. That photograph would become the only surviving evidence of Thomas Walshe's final wishes, because 3 months later, in December of 2018, Brian appeared in Plymouth County Probate Court. He told the judge his father had died without a will. No other family members had been notified of Thomas's death. Brian had kept the information to himself. The court, unaware of what Thomas's friends knew, appointed Brian as personal representative of this estate. With that authority, he had legal control over everything his father had owned. And according to court filings from family members and friends, he immediately began converting that control into cash. The liquidation, as described in probate documents, was methodical. Brian allegedly drained at least $250,000 from his father's bank accounts. He sold artwork that Thomas had collected, an original Salvador Dalí. He sold oriental rugs, Miró glass, Asian antiques, pottery. He sold his father's car. He put the waterfront house in Hull under contract, reportedly weeks away from closing. By the time anyone realized what was happening, according to his cousin Andrew, Brian had already removed valuables from the property and was positioning himself to walk away with everything. Andrew Walshe, the nephew Thomas had actually designated as the executor, eventually learned his uncle had died. He found out through Thomas's friends, not through Brian. What he discovered next was worse. His cousin had seized control of the estate, claimed there was no will, and was systematically dismantling everything Thomas had left behind. In July of 2019, Andrew petitioned the court to remove Brian as personal representative. His filing was direct. It is clear that Brian destroyed the last will and testament, which excluded him from any inheritance when he gained access to the Hull property. Andrew also noted that Brian had isolated himself from the entire extended family, and the reason was obvious to everyone. They all knew what he had done to his father years earlier. Brian, of course, in his sociopathic way, contested the claim. He submitted his own affidavit, painting a completely different picture. He wrote that he and his father had actually reconciled in March of 2017, that they'd spoken candidly for the first time since a family therapy session in 1996. He claimed Thomas had been planning to move in with him and Anna as he aged. He suggested that his father couldn't have written the 2016 will because of a stroke he'd suffered years earlier. He even floated the possibility that Thomas's signature was forged. Pescatori's response, filed with the court, was unequivocal. Brian's account was a pack of lies. The court ultimately accepted the photographic evidence of the will. Andrew was named personal representative, but the damage had already been done. According to filings, Brian had extracted over $500,000 in assets from the estate before he was removed, $250,000 from bank accounts, another $250,000 in sold possessions. Andrew spent months attempting to force Brian to provide an accounting of where the money went. Those efforts went nowhere, and by the fall of 2023, Andrew abandoned the pursuit entirely. There was no point in continuing. Brian was sitting in a jail cell awaiting trial for the murder of his wife. What makes this story essential to understanding the Anna Walshe case isn't just that it reveals a pattern. It's that the pattern is so consistent it feels almost mechanical. 1 month after his father died in October of 2018, Brian was indicted by federal prosecutors on wire fraud charges. He'd sold 2 fake Andy Warhol paintings to a gallery owner in Los Angeles, convincing a seasoned art dealer that the works were authentic pieces from Warhol's Shadows series. The dealer, Ron Rivlin, later described being conned by Brian as an Oscar-winning performance. Brian pled guilty in 2021. He owed then nearly $500,000 in restitution. The fraud had involved stealing the original paintings from a friend in South Korea, commissioning forgeries, and then deceiving buyers across multiple countries. By the time Anna Walshe disappeared on New Year's Day 2023, the man at the center of the investigation had already demonstrated, according to court records, an established methodology. Allegedly steal from a friend overseas, allegedly steal from your own father, manipulate legal systems, destroy evidence, lie under oath. Prosecutors now allege he killed his wife, a woman who carried a $2.7 million life insurance policy with Brian as the sole beneficiary. Days after discovering she'd been having an affair. The financial pressure was real. He owed restitution he couldn't pay, and his wife was worth more dead than their marriage was worth intact. Thomas Walshe's friends saw this coming in their own way. One of them wrote in a probate filing years before Anna vanished, Brian was and is only interested in getting his father's money. That wasn't speculation. That was the conclusion of people who had watched him operate for decades. The probate case never resulted in criminal charges. Brian was never prosecuted for allegedly destroying his father's will or looting the estate. The legal system treated it as a civil matter, a family dispute over inheritance. Andrew Walshe eventually recovered control of what remained, but the assets Brian had already liquidated were gone. No restitution, no accountability, just a quiet resolution in a courthouse that had no idea the man at the center of the case would soon be accused of something far worse. Dr. Thomas Walshe spent the last years of his life trying to protect what he'd built from a son he no longer trusted. He documented his wishes. He had the will witnessed. He told his friends repeatedly that Brian was receiving nothing, and according to court records, none of it mattered. Brian allegedly walked into that house in Hull, found the document that disinherited him, and made it disappear. He then presented himself to the court as a grieving son, entitled to his father's legacy. He sold the art. He drained the accounts. He nearly sold the house itself. The jury deliberating Anna Walshe's murder is weighing evidence about hatchets and DNA and Google searches about body disposal, or they were. But the behavioral blueprint was established long before any of that. According to those who knew him best and who submitted their observations under penalty of perjury, Brian Walshe is someone who takes what he wants, destroys what stands in his way, and constructs whatever narrative serves his interests. His father tried to stop him with legal documents in clear language, and it was not enough. The people closest to Thomas knew exactly who Brian was. They warned the court. They provided photographs and testimony, and still by the time anyone intervened, Brian had already taken what he had came for. His father's final words to him were, "Best wishes, but nothing else," according to court documents. Brian's response was to erase those words entirely and to help himself to everything. People are scary. People are scary. This is what a narcissist, a sociopath, anything in the dark triad of personality disorders is 1,000% fully capable of. If you have someone like this in your life and they haven't acted out in such an extreme way yet, but you can put the pieces together knowing full damn well that that person operates like this, operates in their own self-interest and only their self-interest, well, it's not a crazy thing to think they could be capable of things like this. Unfortunately, healthy minds, ones that don't have personality disorders to this degree, we don't operate that way. You try to see the best in people. You try to have grace. You try to have mercy. Well, maybe they'll see it this way. Maybe they'll come around. They won't. They won't. Because in the end, narcissism always wins. Not the narcissist. Brian's going to be spending the rest of his life in prison for the murder of his wife. And if it wasn't going to be for the murder of his wife, something else would have put him there. But it wins. They lose. But the act, it's almost like a disease, narcissism. So insidious, so destructive. It takes over the brain and allows it to almost, it's like evil incarnate. A lot of times we talk about evil people, and we're really just talking about malignant narcissists. A brain that's so self-serving that it's capable of this kind of madness. They know no limits. Yeah. Your thoughts in the comments section on YouTube. If you're not already there, search Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi. Would love to get your thoughts, your feedback. Maybe you have a story of a narcissist in your life. I'd love to hear it. We do try to read those comments. We do read them. I try to respond to as many as we can, but we get thousands every day. So, but just know we do pay attention and we do read them. So I'd love to get your thoughts there on YouTube. And if you don't mind, if you have a moment, Apple Podcasts, if you would leave us a review there, that helps us out tremendously in those rankings. Lets other folks know that we exist. So thank you in advance for that. Greatly, greatly appreciated. Until next time, my name's Tony Bruschi. We'll talk again real soon.
Want more on this case and others? Then press subscribe now and don't miss a moment of true crime coverage from Tony Bruschi and the Hidden Killers podcast.